All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're cracking open a case that, let's be honest, affects every single one of us. What actually happens when the internet breaks? We're going to follow the clues in a real digital detective story.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You're in the middle of something important, maybe you're just trying to relax, and bam, nothing. The app won't load, the website's down. It feels so random and, honestly, super frustrating. But here's the thing, it's not a complete mystery. There's actually a whole team on the case.
Now, these aren't your typical detectives, you know? They're network administrators and engineers. Just think of them as the guardians of our digital world. They're the ones who spring into action the second things go dark. And their mission is simple. Find the clues, follow the leads, and figure out what went wrong.
Okay, so to solve these kinds of digital mysteries, our detectives need a pretty specialized toolkit. I mean, they can't just dust for fingerprints, right? They have to be able to see exactly what's happening deep inside the network.
You know, every great detective has a reliable informant. And in the digital world, that informant is something called SNMP. It's a protocol, which is just a fancy way of saying a set of rules, that lets our detectives basically interrogate any device on the network. We're talking servers, switches, you name it, and get straight answers.
And the way this informant works is surprisingly simple. The detective's main computer, which we'll call the manager, sends out a question. Then an agent, that's just a little piece of software sitting on a router or a server, hears that question and sends back an answer. And every single one of those answers, it's another clue for the investigation.
And of course, just like any conversation, there are rules. The MIB, well, that's kind of like a dictionary that lays out all the possible questions you can even ask. Then you've got traps, which are incredibly useful. That's when the informant doesn't even wait to be asked. It sends a proactive alert saying, hey, something's going wrong over here. And to make sure they're talking to the right informant, they use passwords, everything from simple community strings to much more advanced authentication.
Okay, so sometimes the detective just needs a high-level overview. Think of it like a traffic report for the internet. That's what we call flow data. It just shows who's talking to whom and for how long. But other times, they need to listen in on the actual conversation. And for that, they use something called packet capture, which is a super detailed deep dive into the data itself.
So you might be wondering, how do they listen in without actually disrupting everything? Well, they use a clever technique called port mirroring. It's pretty much the digital version of a wiretap. It makes an exact copy of all the data flowing through one specific point, so the detective can analyze it on the side completely safely.
All right, with clues flying in from all over the network, a detective desperately needs a place to organize it all, right? That's where something called a SIM comes in. I want you to think of it as the central evidence locker, or maybe that big corkboard in the detective's office where they pin up all the clues and connect them with string. It's where all these separate pieces of information start to tell a story.
And believe me, a ton of information flows into that locker. You've got event logs from something called a syslog collector. You have evidence coming in from other specialized tools through APIs. You have that high-level flow data we talked about. And of course, those really urgent trap alerts from our SNMP informant. The SIEM's whole job is to take all of that and connect the dots.
All right, so our detective has their toolkit ready to go. What's the day-to-day mission? Well, it's not just about swooping in to solve crimes after they happen. It's about constant vigilance. It's about keeping watch over the entire digital city 24/7.
I mean, you can't protect a city if you don't have a map. It's just common sense. And that's exactly why network discovery is always the first, absolutely crucial step. It's the whole process of finding and identifying every single device that's connected to the network just to create a complete and accurate picture of what you're even trying to protect.
And there are really two main ways they do this. First, there's ad hoc discovery. That's like an on-the-spot investigation that gets triggered when some new, unknown device just suddenly appears on the network. But then you have scheduled discovery, which is much more like a regular patrol, you know? It's an automated scan that just runs all the time to make sure that map is always up to date. So this all feeds into what you could call their daily patrols. They're doing performance monitoring. That's like checking the city's vital signs to make sure everything's running smoothly. They're checking availability, which is literally just, are the lights on downtown? They're watching the configuration to see if anyone has secretly altered the city plan, and, of course, traffic analysis. That's all about just watching the streets for any kind of unusual activity.
Now, solving problems after they happen is one thing, But the ultimate goal for any great detective is to stop the crime before it even happens. And the exact same thing is true for our network guardians.
And this really is the crucial point. Reacting to an outage is good, but being proactive is a complete game changer. The best in the business, they use their tools not just to figure out what went wrong in the past, but to actually predict and prevent future problems from ever happening.
So how do they do that? How do you predict the future? Well, it all starts with establishing a baseline. A detective has to know what a normal day in the city looks like. So by constantly measuring things like traffic and memory use and all that, they build a really clear picture of what's considered normal, healthy behavior. Because once you know what normal is, spotting the abnormal becomes way, way easier. Let's say, for example, that traffic on a Tuesday afternoon is usually around 250 megabits per second. If it suddenly spikes to 800, well, that's an anomaly. That's a huge red flag that something is wrong, and it might just be the very beginning of one of those major outages we all hate.
And the good news is, our detectives don't have to sit there staring at charts all day long. Modern systems do all the watching for them. The second a deviation from that baseline is detected, an automated alert gets fired off, instantly telling the team, hey, you need to look at this right now.
And in the end, it really all comes down to this one thing: catching that one single event, that one little anomaly, that one misconfiguration, before it has a chance to cascade into a massive outage that takes everything down with it.
Which, of course, leaves us with a final, really important question. The digital world we all rely on. It's getting infinitely more complex every single day. The mysteries are getting deeper, the problems are getting harder to find. So the question is, can our digital detectives and their tools actually keep up with all these new mysteries? Well, I guess only time will tell.